Welcome. You're listening to episode 43 of Paws and Play, the Prevent-A-Vet podcast. If you're listening to this episode, there's a good chance that you've thought about fostering an animal. I know my household certainly has. So I spoke with current cat foster guardian, LeeAnna Bias, about steps to take to become a foster, what to expect, and the many benefits that come with the experience for the animals and for yourself. If you were sitting on the fence about whether to get started before, be prepared to start searching for foster opportunities after listening. And now, let's start the show. Welcome back to another episode of Paws and Play. I am your host, Mia, and I've got a very special guest here with me, socially distanced, of course, via Zoom, LeeAnna Bias. How are you doing?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I have been following a bit of your cat fostering experience now for a while, and you've written some really great articles for us. And we just thought that it would be great to talk to you and hear about your foster experience and how things are going, things that you've learned, and any advice that you've got for anybody thinking about potentially becoming a foster. So first, what kind of experience did you have with cats or animals growing up? Did you have a lot of experience with them before turning into the animal lover that you are now?
Yeah, I actually grew up in one of those houses, thankfully, where my mother would just take in anything that needed help. You know, we had strays that we would find. I think one time we found 4 puppies out in the desert. One time we found a pregnant dog who ended up having, I think, 14 puppies. So we'd find them. They would just show up at our house. We would have friends say, hey, my friend has this dog that he can't keep. Can you guys take him so he doesn't have to go to the shelter? She found a rabbit who had been hit by a wild rabbit who had been hit by a car one time that we tried to rehabilitate. So yeah, I came from a house where, you know, if it was an animal and it needed something, you did what you could.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So the love of animals was instilled from me pretty much from the day that I was born.
That's really lucky, and to have like all of that experience really being able to take part in, but also watch your mom kind of be this superhero to all of these animals in need. That's really amazing. So I guess what was the catalyst in you becoming a foster now?
You know, I was thinking about that last night, and I'm saying this as I have foster cats climbing all over me.
I wish everybody could see it. This is going to be an audio version, but he's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I was thinking last night, when did I first get the idea to foster? And I honestly can't remember when it first came to me. I just know that I always wanted to foster, you know, even from like my early 20s, but I always let things kind of hold me back from it, which I wish I hadn't. You know, at first it was, I had a senior cat at the time and I didn't want to upset his routine. So I wanted to wait until he was gone and then start fostering. But he ended up living, thankfully, for 18 years. And then I ended up with 2 more cats that I caught and kind of forced to love me during the time that he was alive. And then I moved into very small apartments and, you know, just thing after thing made me kind of feel like I wasn't ready, even though I desperately wanted to do it. So for me, it was buying a house.
That was like your goal.
Yeah, that finally let me say, okay, I have a dedicated room. I have lots of space. This isn't going to upheave my cats' lives. Now that I've been fostering for a while, I know that it wouldn't have upheaved their lives. I could have done it even in a small apartment. It's just about the kind of foster that you take in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask about that because I bet that stops a lot of people just having a smaller space.
Yeah, I think so. And now my cat is climbing the closet. So you can hear him banging around in the background. Yeah, it just all depends on the kind of animal that you take in. Some really need friendship and socialization and want to be around other animals. So if you have an animal that gets along well with others, then that small space is perfect. You know, some need their quiet, they need their space. So if you have animals that are not going to be good with your foster, that can work too. If you have a separate room, there's a certain kind of animal that does really well in a space where they're not allowed to mingle with your cats. The bigger they are, the more space they take up. And not even just cats. I mean, you can foster anything, rabbits, guinea pigs, anything can be fostered. It really is just such a customizable opportunity to do a whole lot of good without really impacting your day-to-day lifestyle.
That's really interesting. So I guess is part of that in the kind of application process for can you specify what maybe your needs are as a potential foster when you're going through the process? And I'm assuming that they do like a full application and interview, but I don't really know.
And there are a million different kinds of rescue organizations out there. Some are larger and have lots of staff and big facilities. Others are literally just a couple of people who go out and rescue animals off the street and then rely on a network of foster homes to take them right away. So there are a lot of different types of rescue organizations. They all have different policies. They all do things a little differently. But one of the biggest things that we talk about early on in the Foster Cats 101 series that you're talking about, the articles, is how important it is to really look at what you can provide and not feel like you need to provide more than that. And what I mean by that is if you have a busy lifestyle and you're not home a lot, don't think you have to take in a cat who needs a lot of attention or who has medical needs that needs a lot of monitoring. You can take in a perfectly healthy cat who's just going to enjoy living in your space. If you're the kind of person who can wake up every couple of hours and still function perfectly well the next day, you might do well with kittens who need feedings overnight. If you're not that kind of person, that's okay too. There's a different kind of foster case that would be perfect for you. So it's really about kind of going through your life, understanding the different kinds of foster cases that are out there, and then figuring out which one fits best with what you can give. Because ultimately, if it doesn't work for you or it doesn't work for the cat, then nobody wins.
Right. It's kind of a undoing of everything that was supposed to be
exactly
working towards a specific goal. So I guess what was your process in like researching potential foster, or rescues to deal with, and what kinds of things did they, I guess, prepare you for?
Sure. So I researched quite a few rescues in the area. I'm actually approved to foster with 2 different organizations right now. I'm actually thinking of looking into some smaller ones as well.
So you went the bigger route first?
I went the bigger route to start, yeah. Generally, they have some pretty clear outlines on their website of kind of what fostering looks like for them and their specific policies. For example, in our area, Paws does a tremendous amount of foster work, wildlife rehabilitation, all kinds of things. And their policy is that they keep all adoptable animals in-house, which means that you foster until they're adoptable. So if they're going through like a medical recovery or a quarantine or something like that, then you return them to the facility.
Interesting.
And they stay there until they're adopted. Whereas Emerald City Pet Rescue, who's the other one that I work with them, you keep the animal until it's adopted. So for me, that was a better fit.
Yeah, and I can understand why. For just the benefits of being a foster home, and I mean that like home, literally, versus just in a random kennel.
Yeah. So some of the, those are the kinds of things that I researched when I was looking through different rescues and their policies was, how is the adoption process? How do they select foster guardians or match them with potential foster cats? the kinds of cases that they take in. So for example, Emerald City Pet Rescue generally doesn't focus so much on young animals like kittens and puppies. They're more older and senior, and the animals that they foster out are generally medical. So they're going through recovery of some sort.
Okay.
Whereas with Paws, they take a lot of transports from other areas. So for example, if there's a natural disaster somewhere and they're trying to clear the shelters out, they'll take in a lot of those animals, and they'll just come stay with you for a few weeks while they're going through whatever they need to go back on the adoption list. You have some rescues that only focus on seniors, that only focus on kittens. So it's, you want to research the kind of animals that they bring in, and then, understanding their requirements too. Some will only allow you to foster one animal at a time. Others will allow more. Some prefer that you only foster their animals. So at different times, you can foster with different organizations, but they don't want you fostering their cat along with another rescue's cat at the same time, because they can't be sure of vaccines and things like that.
Sure, yeah.
So those kinds of things. Some need to make sure that you are allowed to have animals in your apartment or your condo.
Right. Yeah, that would be important.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just looking for things like that and finding the group that you think is the best fit. And then usually you either fill out an application right away or you reach out to them and they contact you directly. There's usually an in-person interview. Some will do a background check, which I think is great.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
I was hoping that there would be an in-person interview and
And this is all, mind you, this is all in a non-quarantine time. So so they'll do a background check. Sometimes there's a small fee for that, but they're not making money on this process at all.
No, of course not.
About that. Some will do a home check. So they'll just come out. It's a breeze. Don't let it stop you. They just come out, take a look at, around the home where you're going to keep the animal. And then that's it. I can't imagine someone not being approved. I think you'd have to be a pretty rotten person to not be approved.
Hopefully none of our listeners are on that list. No. When you were accepted or approved to be a foster for these varying places, did they give you like a welcome packet, or is it kind of some kind of transfer of information for each individual case?
So a little bit of both. And again, this can depend on the organization. Paws, for example, actually puts you through a small training course.
Oh, cool.
I think it was only 2 hours. It was very quick. Again, non-quarantine times, you would go down there and they just had a big classroom. And
back in the day.
Back when you could actually see people. And they would just take you through, again, through their policies, through the different kinds of animals that you can foster, what it takes to foster each kind of those animals. For example, a respiratory infection requires a certain amount of care versus a cat with ringworm who has to be completely quarantined versus a completely healthy cat. So they just did a nice little training session about that kind of stuff. When you actually select a foster cat, there's a nice big download of information that should come with that as well. So, they'll tell you as much as they can about the history.
Sure.
There's usually an agreement that you sign that very clearly outlines what you're responsible for, what they're responsible for. It's, the bigger rescues have the process pretty well down. What I would encourage people to do, and I've been lucky enough that I haven't run into this, but not every organization is reputable. Mm-hmm. So they should let you check out the facility. If you have any weird feelings about it, if it doesn't feel like they're communicating the way you need them to, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for references of other families that foster for them.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. About their experiences, because you need to feel comfortable, especially if you're getting into fostering, cases where there are medical issues and the rescue stays in control of all of those decisions.
Right.
But as the foster parent, you're obviously very invested. So you want to make sure that you trust each other.
Right. Yeah, that's got to be, that trust is paramount, I would have to assume.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So, I just encourage people, if you have any concerns, if anything feels off, ask questions, dig around. And if it doesn't feel like the right fit, that's okay. Find a different place. There's no shortage of organizations that need foster support.
Mm-hmm. And so you had kind of said, they're in charge of the medical decisions. I'm assuming that this is maybe across the board, but I could be wrong, that part of one of the benefits of being a foster is that the rescue organization or shelters who pays like the medical bills of anything going on. Is that fair to say? Or, I mean, I guess you probably can't speak for every every program out there.
Every single organization on the planet. But yeah, the majority of the time, from my experience and from what I've heard, the rescue organization will cover all medical costs unless you've done something.
Sure. Well, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, 99% of the time they cover all medical costs. That would be my cat in the background climbing the patio screen door.
That's the cat, by the way, that's in our Feed You Now video, correct?
Actually, the one that's climbing the screen is probably my new foster.
Okay.
Yes. The one that's in the Feed Me Now video is Ollie, who was my first foster, who I fell in love with and adopted after like 5 days.
That happens too. Foster fails.
Yep. We can talk about that.
Adoption wins, though.
Exactly. Now I forgot what we were talking about. I got sidetracked by my cute cat. Oh, medical coverage. Yes. So they handle all the medical. Some will also handle supplies.
Okay. So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And that's another thing to keep in mind as you're looking at the kind of rescue you want to work with. If you need an organization that will give you all the supplies or just food, or if you prefer to do the supplies yourself so that they don't have that expense, all things to think about. But yes, they will cover medical. They also make all of the medical decisions, which I think is a really important thing to keep in mind if you take those cases. And I should say too, I specialize. Well, I should say I specialize. You
can go ahead and say you specialize.
I specialize in cats that are going through some sort of medical recovery or socialization issues. So that's what I talk about a lot, but you can also foster perfectly healthy animals that will just come in and live in your house for a while and be amazing. So,
that's a really important distinction. And also I think that especially when we're talking about like the cost of things, that I'm sure that is like holds a ton of people back from opening their home to an animal. But this really seems like, if you've got the love and you've got the space, you should definitely consider these types of options.
Absolutely. The rescues are going to do anything they can to make it easy for you. I mean, if they're a good rescue, and I haven't found any that aren't, you're volunteering, you're helping, you're making it easier for them to help other animals because you're taking this one kind of off their plate, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So it's to their benefit to have you as a volunteer, as a foster. So they're going to do whatever they can to make that process go as smoothly as possible.
Yeah. So talking about benefits, I mean, I feel like it's obvious what a lot of the benefit is to the animal in question, but maybe there's some hidden benefits that, might not be as obvious, but also some benefits for the humans as well. Like what would you say have been some of the bigger benefits?
Sure. You're right. There are different ways to look at it. From my perspective, the kind of selfish side of fostering is that I'm doing something that I can be really proud of. Mm-hmm. I can go out and talk to my friends about this and feel really good about what I'm doing. And it's making a significant difference. And there aren't, in our day-to-day lives, there aren't a lot of opportunities to really do that. So selfishly, I really love to be able to say, heck yeah, I foster. And, and then people get all excited about it. And I love that. But
selfishly unselfish.
Exactly. Exactly. And it also, again, for me, in your lifetime, you generally don't get to know a lot of different animals. You know your pets, the pets of your closest friends. But when you foster, you're getting to know new animals as often as you want to. And that's such a cool experience to get to see, not just their personalities, but how they develop as they come out of these stressful situations and have time to decompress and find themselves again. And, how they handle what they've been through. You can have, you can take in cats who have been through similar experiences and they'll handle them very differently. So, I mean, that's just a cool thing for me to see as a foster guardian. One of the things that kind of caught me off guard with the foster that I ended up adopting, when he was with me, he was only with me for a couple of weeks, and he had some anger issues for completely valid reasons after what he'd been through. But he was a very affectionate, playful, loving, happy, cool cat. And at one point I had to take him back to the rescue for a checkup. And he just instantly became terrified and hissing. And that environment had him so scared. And it really showed me the difference in the quality of life that a foster can have in a home, even if it's for a very short time.
And even in a small space.
Right, before they're adopted. So that was a real eye-opener for me that the life that they can have in a foster home, however long or short it is so dramatically different than what they would have in the shelter. And that's got to impact them, it's going to be a lifelong impact. And it really helps us put them in a better position to find the right kind of home. And to have a successful adoption when they have that time to decompress, to remember what it's like, or to learn for the first time what it's like to be a house cat, and to just kind of calm down. That's why I do it.
Well, it's a great why, that's for sure.
Right? So many whys.
Yeah. I remember having a conversation with Dr. Marcy Kotsky, and, she had mentioned something about, I think it was maybe about there was an aggression issue that we were talking about between some cats. And it was just about like even giving some vertical space options, because cats don't even necessarily need a lot of horizontal space, but if you can give them some vertical space, so in your bathroom, if necessary, or, in a smaller area, that can also really make a huge difference for them. So you said you're working with Marcy?
Yes.
She's fantastic. I love her.
She is my hero. Yeah. My, not to digress, but the foster that I adopted developed some pretty serious rotten devil cat issues.
Was there some spraying or something else?
No, he's just,
that's lucky.
He wasn't getting along well with my cats. He was picking on my older female pretty badly.
Yeah.
Redirecting some of his aggression just from stuff he'd been through. He's still a wonderful little boy, but sometimes he's Satan's cat.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make me love him any less. But I started working with Dr. Marcy, and she's amazing. And the tips she gave me are amazing. And it's only been a month and my household is completely different. And
wow.
Bless her kind heart. It does.
Sorry, go ahead.
Small space. Yes, small space. You don't need a lot of room. A lot of times it just depends on the situation. My current foster, as a matter of fact, when he came to me, he was in recovery from some very serious leg surgeries. He, unfortunately, as a kitten, had been kicked by someone.
Oh, God.
And did some real damage to his back legs and his pelvis. And his owners, he was only 3 months old at the time, I believe, and his owners couldn't take on the financial responsibility. So they surrendered him, and he spent the next 8 months in the shelter. So his whole young adult cat life in the shelter, just going through a few different surgeries. He never healed quite right. They thought they were going to need to amputate, which is why he came to me, because I'd fostered an amputee before. But when he came to me, he was on jumping restriction. So he couldn't have anything in his room. So all he needed was an empty room with, a bed and toys on the floor. But he wasn't allowed to jump up on anything. I had to take the furniture out. So he was perfectly fine in a very small space because up to that point, he had been on bed rest in a kennel for 8 months.
Right. So any room was basically a mansion for him at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really got to think in context. You may not have a lot of space, but unless you live in one of those tiny little pods, you probably have 3 times, 4 times, 100 times the space that a cat would have had in the shelter.
Sure.
And the shelters do the absolute best they can.
Right. Of course. I mean, they have to make them that small to fit as many in.
Right. Amazing people doing amazing things, and giving them as much space and as much time out of the kennels as they can. But that's why they need foster families, because they know that they can't give an animal everything it needs.
I'm a little concerned about this conversation because now, of course, all I want to do is foster, but we are not there yet.
I literally, everything that I've been doing, talking about fostering, I'm just waiting for that one person to say they started fostering because they read something, and then my life will be complete.
Well, I mean, you definitely make a lot of great, points about it, for it. If anybody's, riding the fence on it, I think that this could definitely tip them over. If I didn't think that my senior pug would completely lose her mind, I would. I think I'd be all over it right now. So who knows if she chills out a bit more, maybe by next year it'll happen.
Well, and let me say too, for people riding the fence, I think that the most important thing to remember about fostering is that it's totally customizable. It shouldn't intimidate you. It's a commitment to find a shelter that you want to work with. And obviously you're committing to each animal you take, but you decide how often you want to foster. You don't have to foster consistently. You could foster for 2 months out of the year, just one animal a year for a couple of months. And, think about the lives that you impact. You decide when you want to take in a new foster. You decide which case you want to take, whether you want a complicated case or a simple case. It's not as consuming as people might think it is, unless you're taking on some of the really serious cases, which, you can, and they're amazing. And I do some of those. They're fantastic. But you really have so much control over what you do and when you do and how you do with fostering that I just don't want people to think that once they start, that's their life from then on.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it here and there, and it's still such a huge, huge help and a huge impact. And it takes so much pressure off the shelters.
I mean, you make amazing points. Seriously. I mean, it's like, one of my questions would have been, so who would you say the perfect candidate to be a foster is? But it sounds like it's literally anybody that has the heart. Oh, there's your baby.
Yep.
Has the heart. He is funny. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
But anybody that has the heart and a little bit of space and patience, probably with the animals and with themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes down to space, if you're the kind of person that really wants to dive in, neonatal kittens who are unweaned, not weaned, literally can and should live in a tiny little plastic storage bin. So you can literally foster on your coffee table if you want to.
And if you do, please send us a photo so that we can see it in action. Okay, so you said that the shelters or the rescues that you've worked with will give you information, and especially specific to whoever you end up taking. Were there any other outside resources that you found particularly helpful going through all this process?
Not really. I think, and that's kind of what I'm trying to provide through the articles that we're writing, is that outside resource to help people kind of know what to expect. That would be my cat howling in the background now. Wow.
Just wants to be on the podcast. That's all.
Yeah. And that's okay. Not the foster. Fostering doesn't sound like that. That's my real life. Yeah. So what I found when I first got started is that I went into it with a lot of expectations
Mm-hmm.
And that was, this is a cat. He wants to go for a walk. That got me into some trouble because for my first couple of fosters, it didn't go the way I thought it was going to. It was amazing. There was nothing wrong with the experience, but I had this kind of, social media vision in my head
Sure.
that my, senior female was going to be like the motherly caretaker, and that my younger male was going to be big brother, and they were all going to, cuddle together at night. And no, no, and
Yeah.
that didn't happen that way, but that's okay. It was still an amazing experience.
Right.
So,
actually, that's a great point to make, that like your animals don't have to get along, especially not right away. I mean, there's always going to be that process. And just like we can't be expected to like everybody else that we meet. I've been getting rid of a lot of people on social media lately. Like they have to have their own, their ability to like or not like and get away from each other.
And you can keep them in totally separate rooms if you want to. A foster cat living in its own, I call mine the foster suite, but it's a guest room that's set up for my foster cat. It's still a million times better than the kennel that they were in at the shelter. But so, I'm trying to write about, some of those things, managing your expectations, not panicking if you bring a cat home that, and I don't want to scare people with this, but it happens a couple of times that I brought a cat home who didn't have any behavioral issues in the shelter, but when I brought them home, they developed some. If that's too much for you, that's okay, because fostering is customizable, so it's okay for you to say, this is probably not the best fit for this cat. Why don't we try to find another foster home for him and look at someone else for me? But, knowing that things are just going to happen the way they happen, and you kind of have to go with the flow, and giving people tips for how to manage some of those things, helping them understand what could happen so that when it does, you're not caught off guard, you're not confused by it or concerned by it. It doesn't kind of throw you out of wanting to do this. So that's to get back to your original question. I didn't necessarily have any resources like that. Not that they're not out there, but I didn't find them.
Okay.
So that's some of what we're trying to do with these articles, is just kind of tell people what to expect and how to navigate it so that they aren't disappointed or concerned or caught off guard.
Yeah, no, that's great. What would you say has ended up being one of the biggest tools in your toolbox that, has kind of come in handy? And that could be like a product or a book, a podcast, a bottle of wine.
That last one?
Always.
Broad strokes, I would say finding my own patience, understanding that I might not have known as much as I thought I did. And that's okay. Foster guardians don't have to be perfect. And that's, there are a lot of times, and again, I work with kind of difficult cases, so this is not going to be everyone's experience, but, there are times when I'm dealing with a cat who has some aggression issues, and, they'll try to bite me, and I'll find myself getting really angry about it, and I'll have to, leave the room and calm down. Or the opposite, I'll find myself getting, teary about it, because why don't they understand? I'm just trying to love them.
Let me love you.
Exactly. So just trying to manage myself, I think, has probably been the biggest tool.
I mean, that's a big life lesson in general, I'd say.
Right?
Yeah.
See, you can apply fostering tools to your entire life. I think the other thing that I'm really learning, and Dr. Marcy helps with this too, is how to listen to the cat. And that might sound a little new agey, but my current foster, for example, he, like I said, he spent 8 months in the rescue. So he hasn't been a house cat since he was a kitten. And the first few days I had him, he was in his room. If I was in the room with him, he would just like growl and avoid me. He didn't want anything to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really tried to focus on what he was trying to tell me. And I think what it ultimately was like, hey, lady, I have been, in this tiny little space, in this tiny little world for a very long time. And you coming in here and wanting to smother me with attention every 10 minutes is just too much.
Yeah.
So if you could just take a step back and like admire me from the other side of the room, and I'll come see you when I'm ready, we'll be good. And that's absolutely what happened. I just started hanging back a little bit. I would let him come to me. He didn't feel like he had to have his guard up around me the whole time. It made a huge difference in the way we interacted with each other. So I think if you can just turn off your ego, and which is hard for me, turn off your ego and just really try to watch and listen and let them tell you what they need and kind of follow their lead on things. Those are the two biggest tools I think that any foster parent can have.
That's so smart. I love that. And really it's good not just with fosters, but if you're adopting a cat, like, or a dog, or anything really. I mean, sometimes they'll just happily walk in and be on your lap and everything's good to go. But a lot of the times too, there's an adjustment period, and they may not know that they can love you right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. That's the value in fostering, is giving them that time to either learn or remember what it's like to have a home and be around people and trust people and be loved before they go off to their forever homes. So it's so important. And can I just say this too? I think, a lot of people, I don't know that anybody really stops and thinks about this, but in the back of people's minds, I think they kind of assume that rescues and shelters are full of stray cats who were just plucked off the street. And being in a rescue has got to be better than living life on the street. So, the rescue environment might not be so bad. But in reality, a lot of the animals that are in rescues are animals who yesterday were living just like your pets today. My first foster, the one I adopted, he ended up at the rescue because his owner ended up in the hospital. And so animal control had to take all the animals because the previous owner didn't have any arrangements or have anyone that could take them.
Which is another good point. In we had talked to somebody about estate planning, Deborah Hamilton, and it really makes the case for looking into that, setting something up. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. It's a good point. And actually, a friend of mine adopted 2 Persians from a rescue because their owner died.
We adopted our pug because her owner died. Yeah.
There you go. My current foster was surrendered for medical reasons. So, these are all animals who literally yesterday were someone's loved house pet and family member, and today they're in a shelter and don't know what's going on. So I just think it's important to really understand what's happening in the shelters. And again, God bless the shelters for all the work they do. But they're going to be the first ones to admit that an animal is going to be better off in a home than in a rescue. So it's just important to know that there's probably more there going on than you realize. And animals, there are just animals that need a lot more than we realize. And fosters have a chance to fix that.
Yeah. Well, I am sold. That's for sure.
Do it.
It won't happen yet, but
that's okay.
But you can cross that off of your list, because you really have convinced me. It's something that I definitely will be looking into when the time is ready. Because well, what you're doing is great, and like you said, it really doesn't take very much besides the love and a little space and patience all around for anybody. And I really hadn't even thought about it, that you don't have to constantly have new rescues with you. You can really just, you could even probably take a vacation for a little bit, and that's important.
That's actually part of the conversation that you're having with the rescue before you take on a new foster is, any vacations coming up, anything that's going to inhibit your ability to be around. That's all stuff to think about. Sometimes you even want to take a break.
Sure.
Sometimes you need a break, but after a particularly long foster or after a difficult case, or I suffered a foster loss not too long ago, and it didn't diminish my need to foster. I think I wanted to foster even more after that loss.
Sure.
But I needed a break. I needed time to kind of focus on myself and my healing and my animals, and just get good energy flowing through our house again before I took in another foster. So I tend to take a couple of months off in between, and frankly, this is probably going to sound terrible. I have 3 cats of my own, and then I foster 1 additional. So there's 4 cats in my house, and my current foster just got cleared for adoption recently. So he's going up for adoption. And there's that moment of, oh my God, that's right. I only have 3 cats. Thank you. Because 4 just feels like a lot. And so you need that reminder that, oh, phew, I only have 3. This one's not staying forever.
Well, there's probably that, and there's probably somewhere in the back of your mind a little, when you're fostering, no matter what, there's got to be something that's like wanting to hold on to the cat forever, but also wanting to make sure that the cat gets that forever home, and so that you can take in new ones,
Yes.
and help out even more.
And I would say that is probably the number one thing that people say to me. I will tell someone that I foster, and their response 9 times out of 10 is, "That's so amazing. I wish I could do it, but I don't think I could let the cat go." And we're doing an entire article just on that topic as part of the foster cat series. Because if that's what's holding you back, please, please, please reconsider. It's sad when you let one of these animals go, but it's a tiny bit of sad mixed with an immense amount of joy and happiness and positivity. And I mean, the whole experience is so amazing. And to not let yourself do that because of that little tiny bit of sadness at the end is just a real bummer.
Yeah.
And I think it also depends on how you look at it. For me, I go into every foster with the end goal of forever home. I don't ever see them as my cats.
Right.
I see them as
you can't. That would probably be too much of an emotional.
I would mess you up.
Yeah.
But it's from the second they come to me, even from the second that the rescue tells me about them, I'm thinking in my head, okay, these are the steps that we need to go through, me and you, little furry dude, get you to your forever family, because that is the ultimate goal. That is why we're doing what we're doing, and so not getting to that goal is heartbreaking.
Right.
That's the whole reason we're doing this. So I don't look at adoption day as a sad day. I look at it as we did it. We succeeded. This animal just overcame God only knows what. I helped, Amy. And now they can go off and live this, hopefully amazing life. Sadness is just totally eclipsed by all that good stuff. So
right. Yeah.
Try it once. If you're afraid of the goodbye stuff, read the article because there's lots of tips in there, but try it once. And if it's not for you, okay. So
then you end up with adopting a cat.
You have a cat. But my guess is that if you just look at it from that perspective and you just focus on that end goal, that you're going to love it.
Well, I have all the faith in the world that this will be a future thing for many people after this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. And I hope that we'll be able to do this again and maybe get an update on Ollie. It's Ollie, right? Your foster that is now up for, now he's available. Is that correct?
It is Ollie. Ironically, my other cat is named Ollie too, so I've been calling him Buddy because I can't have 50% of my cats named Ollie. So he's through Emerald City Pet Rescue. His adoption page isn't up yet, but it will be soon. He's a lovely little tiger striped tabby, just over a year old, absolute angel. Oh, I love him. I love him. If you could see me right now, I'd be melting into a little puddle. He's amazing.
I can confirm. Awesome. Well, thanks again, LeeAnna. And we'll hopefully talk to you again soon. For everybody listening, we'll be back with another Pause and Play podcast soon. Take care. Thanks for listening. If you've got a question for Kathy that you'd like answered on one of our podcasts, send her an email at training@preventivevet.com. If you'd like to hear about our upcoming Yappy Hours, head to our website, preventivevet.com, to sign up for alerts or get notified when you sign up for the Pause and Play newsletter. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd really appreciate your rating and review so that other pet lovers can find us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be back with another Pause and Play podcast soon.